Gear up, because this is the Fuel Your Marketing podcast, designed to accelerate sales and grow your business. Let's welcome your host, Arti Sharma.
All right, welcome back to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Arti, and we're back with another powerful episode on sales development and state of outbound today. And I'm joined by a guest who's a modern GTM leader, co-founder and CRO of a human-powered, tech-enabled sales development agency. The company is called Punch B2B, and it's a pleasure to have Chris Muldoon join me today. Chris, welcome to the show, and thank you for making the time.
Thanks, Arti. Nice to be here. And it's a bit of too much smoke, I guess. But yeah, appreciate the intro. It's always nice to be wanted.
Yes, and I have always enjoyed having our conversation, so it was so timely. Listen, tell our audience a little bit more about you, and I'm sure I've not done justice, and a bit about Punch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer over at Punch. We are a B2B kind of lead gen outbound agency. So very much our go-to-markets are focused on outbound. So multi-channel, telephone, email, LinkedIn, video, direct mail, but very much focused on how can we generate new pipeline, new opportunities, ROI for clients and customers, and an SDR, BDR function.
And you know what? That's sometimes an unknown territory for many, because those who have not built that function, or those who have not been successful building that function, would greatly appreciate. So those of you who are listening in, please stay tuned. We're having a really good fireside chat today. Everyone's looking to hire. Sometimes I find the hiring mistakes that they make, right? Everyone's looking to hire the top performer, SDR. And in your experience, what do you think are the habits or mindsets did you see consistently setting the good ones from the not so good ones?
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a lot of difference, and I think there's a lot of good ones and bad ones as well. So I think for us, there's absolutely 4 or 5 key things that make up a really good SDR. Can't talk about enough, but positivity, or that positive mindset, is super important. Sales is SDR function, BDR function. It's a tough gig. There's a lot of rejection. So you've got to stay resilient. You've got to stay positive all the time. That's super, super important. I think number 2 is communication skills. You've got to be good. Yeah, yes, you've got to be clear and confident, but actually it's not just about talking. Not just about talking well, but actually connecting with people. Can you be enthusiastic about a boring topic, or make an everyday product seem interesting? That's kind of where that communication skills come into it. And then being adaptable, super important. So being a good SDR, BDR, or even a salesperson is about overcoming objections. Can you think on their feet? Can they adapt and thrive in that kind of fast-paced environment? Really, really important. And then the last 2 for me are kind of curiosity is really important. So what I find the best SDRs are the people that want to learn. They're eager for self-development, or eager to learn and better themselves, or learn about a product or a solution and how an industry works, or a sector. And then kind of the last one is ties in with positivity, but it's that tenacity. We call it being a hunter, having a hunter mentality, but you've got to have that drive and that mentality to succeed. Whilst we talk a lot about Punch around our values and it's a team effort, ultimately, it is competitive sales environment. And I believe a good sales leader, and particularly us at Punch, we can give anyone the skills to do it really, really well. But what a lot of people can't do is give SDRs that, make you want to pick up the phone, make you have that drive, make you want to go and hunt down the opportunity. You've either got that or you don't. I think if you've got it, there's great people out there and great leaders out there to give you the skills, but it's hard to kind of find those people sometimes.
Yeah, and I think resilience, you pointed out, is a great asset in any SDR, because you're going to get a lot more no's. And if you get those lot more no's, and how do you kind of, push back and I think skip that no and turn that and wait for that next yes and keep going. I think that's the beauty of, I think, outbound sales. But I also find that many times, I'm not sure what your thoughts are, many times when I interview SDRs, I'm looking for, how much money do they want to really make? How motivated are they? Because if they're not motivated and they don't have a really big audacious goal for themselves, they're not gonna make me money.
And look, I agree, and I think there's not enough salespeople out there. Like salespeople, the ones that say, "Oh, I want a good base salary." Don't get me wrong, it's important, but you've got to have commission. Sales is a commission game. So if you're not motivated by commission and the ability to earn more money, and the more I work, the harder I work, the more I can earn. People should be wired that way. But I also agree with what you just said. it's really, really hard hiring SDRs because all those things I talked about can't be found on paper. Like they're just sometimes, come across on videos, on interviews, on they're not, probably the CV is at the bottom of the list of what we look for when we hire here at Punch.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's hard, but I it looks like that you've dialed into that and you've got a great team. Now, I know that lots of technology talk is happening, a lot of tech talk is happening on BDR motion, sales, outbound. Companies are often investing in technology. But what are the foundational elements you think, like, coaching or collaboration and anything else that you believe are critical for an SDR success?
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is, look, I guess if you're doing it in-house versus outsourced, and what you're setting up. But I think the really important for me is how to set up your SDR team is that exact word team. I think I speak to so many sales leaders or even high growth startups, and they're saying, "Oh, I had an SDR, I tried it, it didn't work." Well, guess what? They had an SDR. You've got to have at least two or three in that team as a minimum. It is. Yes, you can learn. Yes, you can difference of approach, difference of opinion, but there's also that kind of competitiveness, and it drives success. So you need at least two or three SDRs as a minimum if you're serious about scaling this in house. And then actually, it's so much bigger than that. Like again, those people need a manager, and not just a manager who's, hey, I had some SDRs and I check in with them once a week. You've got to be coaching, motivating, doing role plays, listening back to doing the reps with them. So that manager is almost more important than the reps themselves, just to make sure they're constantly developing and constantly looking at new initiatives. And actually, one of the newer ones, which we talk a lot about, is actually fundamental now, having someone doing data. Like data is so important. So those those companies that said, I'm thinking about hiring an SDR, and they say, oh, I hired one SDR and it didn't work, or we're seeing how it goes. For me, you've got to have someone doing data, or a really good technology stack to get good data, someone to motivate, coach, and train and manage that team, and have at least two or three SDRs in minimum to drive competitiveness and everything else. So yeah, it's so much bigger than just, I'm going to give SDRs a go and see how it goes. It needs a proper
Yeah,
plan.
you can wing it, and these are expensive investments, and SDRs are not, I find that it takes time to build that team. But if you're building it in-house, you got to have a playbook. I think some
Yeah.
people hire, they're expecting the SDR to build the playbook. Well, as a result of that, there might be falling on a thud. But I think there is a need for a sales playbook. And if they're kind of outsourcing, they obviously have to make sure that the agency that they're working with, I'm sure you guys do that they have a playbook, they have an understanding of your product services, and someone who's really inclined to, as you said earlier, positively inclined towards working on
Yeah.
that particular product or service. So outbound's changing so much. There's a different school of thought happening. Outbound is dead, and it gets a bad rap, right? And with claims like it's dead, we both know
Uh-huh.
it's more nuanced than that, right? I mean, so what's your take? I mean, are we in a reinvention phase for outbound? Is technology going to take over? What's your take?
Yeah, and I guess I'm laughing slightly, and not just outbound, but we hear the statement cold calling is dead a lot, and obviously cold calling is only one part of outbound. But I started the agency 8, 10 years ago, and I think on day one I still heard cold calling is dead, and here we are 10 years later, going strong and growing. So it makes me laugh from time to times, but I do agree. I think certain tactics are definitely becoming less impactful, due to, we can talk about technology later and things, but due to the rise of certain technology or certain lazy practices. So yeah, email is dying a bit of a death. LinkedIn, digital channels, they change every 6, 12, 18 months. We go in waves. COVID came along and everything changed. Now AI automations come along and everything's changing again. So it does go in waves, but actually for us, you know, across the agency, we talk a lot about our go-to-markets and outbound go-to-markets. And yes, there is multi-channel, multiple tactics, relevance, personalization is super important. But 90% of our meetings still come over the phone. Picking up that phone, having a conversation, driving that connection with a decision maker. The telephone for me is still the number one channel to drive success and drive outbound. And actually, I saw an interesting stat. I was at an event last week and saw this interesting stat from Cognizant, and they mentioned that the CEOs and senior executives, C-suites, are research shows that these are the most likely decision makers to pick up a cold call, yet they're the ones that get cold called the least. So, salespeople, marketing people, CIOs, they're getting bombarded, but actually C-suite and CEOs are the least bombarded out of everyone, but they're the most likely to pick up a call.
Probably don't get those many cold calls, and when they get, they pick it up.
Exactly. I mean,
Golden
Arti, when was
nugget
the last time you went on holiday and had a week's holiday?
Yeah, and well,
And-
you're right. We are always working. I'm always working, and even when I am away, I will take the phone call.
Exactly. And I imagine when you did go away for a week or so, how many emails did you come back to? Hundreds and thousands. How many missed calls did you have?
Well, you know what? My mantra is very simple. If it's so urgent and dire, somebody would follow up again.
Yeah.
And I go through them very quickly and scan them if it needs really immediate attention. So I'm a little different. I also get my mailbox monitored. So that's a different
Okay.
ball game, but I really see what you're saying. CEOs, I find that yes, they don't get as many cold calls, but when they do, they pick up the phones, which is interesting. But I also have to add to that point, and you really said Outbound has a variety of different channels. And I
Yeah.
think what we are used to in most of the companies, they're kind of, operating in those silos. Somebody's sending the email, somebody's like, the marketing department is sending the nurturing campaigns, or an SDR is calling, but there's no it's pretty disjointed. As long as it's jointed and it's kind of, intertwined with the workflow that works, and you have to test it out several times in order for it to work. I think that's when testing comes into play, and make sure that, you're using the data that you're talking about to see what is working, and it has to evolve and pivot because user behavior is shifting really fast and so rapidly.
Yeah.
Outbound strategies have to evolve and also get more, I think, aligned rather than operating in their own siloed environment. So what do you think is to stay relevant in the next 5 years and changing user behaviors? What is going to be the state of Outbound?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think, just going back to something you just mentioned just then as well, like I still think, I know if you go to any ABM conference, any marketing conference, any sales conference, everyone's talking about sales and marketing alignment. And we've been talking about it for years. But actually the truth is you're right. I still speak, I'm sure you do, speak to so many marketers or sales teams who marketing are doing all this great work, producing loads of MQLs and click-throughs and opens and downloads. And guess what? Sales teams aren't doing anything with them. Or they go, oh yeah, I called them once and nothing happened with it. So I do think there's still a huge disconnect between kind of marketing and sales working truly together to kind of, work leads, work content, work a proper strategy, which is kind of an end-to-end go-to-market opposed to kind of that disconnect. But I think I guess to answer your question, how's it evolving? I think that we can't deny technology is automating it, and it has. Even in the last 12, 18 months, it's hugely made a big impact. I think moving forward, branding content's going to be super important, not just from a sales point of view, but I think, sales, BDRs, SDRs, having a presence on social, being I don't want to say thought leader, but being active is going to make a big difference whether a company chooses you to work with or someone else. So I think I see it a lot. A lot of people are investing in personal brand and their own, profile as a sales rep or a sales leader. I think for me, and again, I know there's lots of conversations out there that contradict this, but SDR is on the rise. Like, it's getting more and more competitive to find good talent. So I think the interesting thing is, particularly with maybe not millennials, but Gen Z certainly, they've been raised in this digital era, and they're so used to being on their phones and content and marketing. There's less and less than that want to pick up the phone and have conversations, but do that as a living. No one comes out of school and says, I want to be a salesperson. It just doesn't happen. So whilst it's on the rise, it's getting harder and harder to find good talent who, those hunters who really are good at it and want to do it. I think it's going to be really competitive moving forward.
Yeah, and I think Outbound isn't just going to also be about dialing for dollars anymore, right?
Of course.
It requires a lot of precision, a lot of value that you need to create for the other person on the phone. I think the companies who are winning at Outbound today really have their go-to-market strategy fully aligned, their product, sales, marketing, working in kind of, complete alignment to create that hyper-relevant messaging. And you rightly said, founder-led marketing is going to become very important because it would be inbound and outbound combined, that's going to create more winning. I think more wins for companies, and I think those who are kind of using outbound just as a feel good factor probably are not going to have
Yeah.
that win rates, those conversion rates, and I think it has to be part of that holistic strategy. So what I'm hearing is that SDRs are going to be alive. Technology will play a role, and we're going to be in a competitive landscape to find the top talent. And those great SDRs are going to be in demand a lot more.
Mm.
They're in market. So, when at what stage do you think in the overall go-to-market, let's say an organization is trying to build an SDR function, and at what stage and what kind of KPIs do you think they should be kind of setting up to create more success early on?
Yeah, I think it's really important as well for companies to understand, who they need to do the work around who they're targeting, what's their ICP, what's their proposition. That's absolutely fundamental. And also, what's their sales cycle, what's their sales, their value, what's their ACV, what's their LTV. Like those are super important. And we often say, but for outbound to be really successful, you have to, it works best, and this isn't in all use cases, but when you've got a large ticket item, it's a fairly complex sales cycle. That's when the outbound motion can add so much, um, you know, support into that process. If you've got a low ticket item, hundreds of dollars or low thousands, inbound strategy, paid media, paid ads, like that's going to be so much better from a lower cost per lead. But you can convert them over the website, you can convert them over the phone. It's a lot easier. Actually, I think it's about understanding those kind of, what are the KPIs, what are the tactics for us? We don't talk a lot about meetings booked. It's around, pipeline creation. We also look at things like not just the pipeline, but ROI, meetings booked, meetings sat, multi-channel, multi-threading, how many touch points have we gone through, but also at the top of the funnel, how are we now nurturing these leads? How many are we adding into the nurture pot? What insight, intelligence we gather around these companies that's kind of unfortunately doesn't have a value in today's go to market. Sales leaders are focused on, meetings, ROI, pipeline. But for me, there's so much value in that middle piece in, okay, we had 5 meetings. There's another 100 people I've now spoken with, and I've started to really understand who they're working with, what budgets they have, what's their plans next year, what's their need for this solution in the next 12 months. And unfortunately, that doesn't have a value. And I think good sales teams understand that value, whereas a lot of sales leaders will be, hey, how many results can I get this week? How many MQLs have got coming through? How many, and I think that's that broken bit still.
I agree totally because sometimes we're just so focused on the activity and the outcome that we
Yeah.
forget data that SGR team can bring back to refine the product market, the go to market, the ICPs, and kind of have that involvement and then feel that involvement, because once they're involved, they have a little bit more skin in the game as well. So I think we
Yeah.
and you need a great sales leader. You have to have a sales manager in order for you to kind of be able to dissect that data, listen to what the sales team is encountering over the phones, and bringing that back into a different, I think, functions and different business units. So,
Yeah,
um,
and that's where
so
that sorry to go, that's where that marketing and sales alignment plays really dividends. If you've done well, those salespeople on the front end having those conversations. What's the objections? What am I hearing out there? That should be feeding marketing. Hey, guess what? We keep coming across the same objection time and time again. Can we create a webinar? Can we put a piece of content together that's going to alleviate that? Or, actually the proposition we thought that it was isn't resonating. Actually, what people care about is this. Let's change our proposition. Let's change our go-to-market. Like having a good sales leader and sales team can be so valuable to the business from a proposition, marketing development, product development. It has so much more than just generating leads.
yeah, it's not about targeting the right accounts. It's about targeting the right problems,
Yeah.
and the right timing, and bringing that back holistically into the organization. And that's when I think outbound becomes a strategic asset instead of a cost center. So there's a little bit of that. I really like that thought process. So, we talked a little bit about motivation of SDRs and compensation models. We touched briefly about that. Uh, as it becomes more and more difficult to hire the best sales executives and SDRs, compensation is a huge motivator, right? Would you
Yeah.
agree? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, SDRs.
Yeah. But it's a pain point for leaders. And what trends are you noticing in terms of reshaping how SDRs get paid, compensated?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's always a topic of conversation. Look, if you ask any SDR, they'll say they're not adequately compensated enough. It's always there's a fine line of what's the opportunity, what's the value, what's the worth. So having a compensation plan is super important. Like you shouldn't be in sales or you shouldn't be motivating sales teams with a high base salary. Don't get me wrong, you should have a high base salary, but it needs to be an addition, bonuses, annual meeting performance, whatever it may be. I think where years gone by, it was all around meetings. How many meetings can I book? How many leads can I generate? I think that shifted in the most recent trend to be making sure it's quality. So meetings sat, meetings that have gone to pipe stage, meetings that have gone to deal stage, all meetings that have won are super, super important. I think going back to what we talked about earlier, a really good SDR isn't just involved in the meeting generation. Nowadays, enterprise, C-suite, large enterprise deals, they've got 6, 12, 18-month sales cycle. So actually that SDR should be involved in that whole process. How was that meeting? What's next? Shall I take it back and nurture it? Shall I invite them to an event we've got coming up? Shall we now multi-thread into that and get more stakeholders involved? So actually some sort of compensation for closed one. I know that's normally left for salespeople, AEs, but actually SDRs and BDRs should be rewarded in my mind. And most recently, and actually this is something I haven't come across before, but I literally fresh in my mind from an event I attended this week, and I'm probably going to implement it here at Punch. But again, speaking to the guys at Cognism at an event last week, they're currently investing so much in multi-threading, and we all know that getting more and more stakeholders involved, buying decision making is getting larger and larger, and it's a now must that you've got to have 4, 5, 6, 7 people engaged in this enterprise sale. So they're actually compensating their reps on multi-threading. The more people that get involved, I don't know how it works per se, but more commission, or every new stakeholder they get involved, the commission percentage goes up. So that was really interesting.
That is interesting. And I think that's such a great move because, as you know, complex sales, enterprise level sales, and even mid market, when there's a lot more people involved in the buying committee, you got to kind of have the champion, I always say Charlie, the champion and the decision maker, and those influencers in the room. So that's interesting to see. I also agree that it's not just about booking the appointment. It's about, if you're talking about revenue generation, SDRs have to be compensated throughout the buying cycle
Absolutely.
at overall. And I think some good SDRs can actually accelerate and the pipeline velocity, and it can be involved there because once they're compensated, they have more skin in the game to not just leave with the appointment. They will actually work harder and smarter towards moving that throughout the pipeline. So that's great. And you know what, quota is often treated as a singular number, but it's really the outcome of a larger system. I mean, if your inbound pipeline or your pipeline overall isn't aligned, your outbound efforts would not work.
Yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit about, there's often tension between setting aggressive goals and then creating sustainable comp plans, right? So compensation plans there, but it's kind of, tied with such an aggressive goal. It's based on what maybe, the department thinks, not based on data, and sometimes, and especially in
Yeah.
technology, we've seen what happened over the last 2, 3 years. Talk to me a little bit about specifically for those kind of organizations where PE firms and VC firms were throwing money and growth at all costs was the mantra. And today, when outbound's becoming, cold calling is becoming more difficult, outbound is becoming more difficult and more, I think it's becoming more of a science. How do companies leverage the function, but also create more sustainable comp plans as well as quotas for SDRs to stay motivated?
Yeah, and I think the point you mentioned just then, data or scientific, like it's super important. I see this time and time again, particularly with I know it's changing slightly since the VC grow at all costs years, but particularly back then, it was all around what are our growth numbers. That's the goal. That's the KPI. That's the target. It wasn't based on how was last quarter. What does an average rep get? What does good look like? Let's base it on reality. So I'm always really open with the team that we base it on data over the last 3, 6, 9 months, and that's going to inform our next quarter's goals, KPIs, not what we'd love to do as a business, because that's what I'll go. Let's say, for example, last quarter, my BDR team got 155, meetings or whatever, meetings sat that went into pipeline and deal stage, whatever. And that's good. They had a good quarter and good month. But next quarter, we need 300 because our business goal goes on that. But I've got the same team. I'm not going to do anything different. But a lot of, like you said, VC grow at all costs would be, well, the goal next quarter is net 300. It's not realistic. It's not based on data. It's not achievable. So you end up demotivating those reps at the end of the quarter when they don't hit it. So, for us, it's all around what would we expect. It's super data driven. It's process driven. We know that this is what, this is how you get there. So based on that, this is the quarter KPI. So I don't know if I have any practical advice other than set it on, where you are now opposed to what you need as a business, because it's just, then you're going to get the best out of the team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it cannot be realistic. You have to use your existing data, but you also have to look at the market environment today and say what is achievable and how do you keep your SDRs inspired and keep this channel performing for you.
Yeah, and I think again that's where good sales leaders or great sales leaders even can understand that and push back, because they'll be getting pressure from the VCs or CEOs or senior leadership, and they need to say, not just say yes to these targets because that's the business goal and that's the growth goal. That's not realistic. Well, I'm not going to get that. Or if you want me to get that, this is how we do it. And I need more investment. I need more heads. I need more whatever.
Yeah, and I think there's a strategic thinking behind it, and you have to have the courage to go to the board and say, what you experienced 2 years ago probably is not going to happen. And
yeah,
and I know it's hard for CROs and CMOs at this stage, but I guess that's the way to go. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We've talked briefly about technology. We talked about how SDRs need to use technology, but AI's role in sales is I always say that AI is rewriting the rules of sales, right? From your perspective, what's the biggest opportunity for SDRs, and what is AI going to create for us?
Look, AI is not just sales. AI is pretty incredible in all areas. But yeah, it is getting a lot of press, and I think there's a lot of talk out there in terms of what the future looks like. I think, look, it is pretty incredible. It already does pretty incredible things, but I think it's only going to get better. I think, as I mentioned earlier, and a big thing we talk about is, really good SDRs or BDRs. It's about understanding how they can leverage AI to make their job better, replacing mundane tasks, replacing research, replacing personalization. It can make them more efficient. It can make them more personalized. But for me, it's only ever a human aid. Like it's a human-led approach to SDR and outbound. So I don't, never say never, but I don't see that changing. It can do some incredible things. Like I said, personalization at scale, do that research for you, find better data. But we're also starting to die a bit of a death from the AI email cadences that are just, personalized for you. And they're all the same. They're rubbish. It's making click-through and open rates, plummet because they're not personalized. They're not truly researched. And you can tell the difference. So it has its place to find that information really effectively and really quickly, but good SDRs will know how to leverage that, how to be more creative, more tactics. I think then the other thing that I get asked all the time about is robo dialing or virtual AI, virtual SDRs. I don't think, like, again, never say never. Let's see what the future holds, but they're not there yet. And actually, just to set the record straight, because I get asked on a weekly basis, like robo calling currently from an outbound point of view is illegal in most countries. So you're not able to make an outbound call with a voice generated bot. I think for inbound and call centers and, getting your car serviced or whatever else, I think it'll be a game changer. I think it'll be fantastic, but I can't see it replacing outbound.
But you know what? It's you said all the right things. I agree with you. I mean, quite honestly, I've been towing the idea of avatars and AI avatars, and I think it might get there at some point. But right now, we're not ready. I mean, I'm not even sure if we ever will. But as you said, we're at an interesting intersection where AI would enable a lot of hyper personalization, as you pointed out, and tools like GPT can craft tailored emails, but still, you need that human touch. It's still up to the SDR to add that layer of authenticity and timing and something that converts. I think what I love about AI is that it's shifting the BDRs and SDRs from being those task takers or order takers to strategists, right? Instead of spending a whole lot of time researching prospects. Of course, there's technology now enabling SDRs, and a lot of CRMs are in time. Like RB2B is another product that we use internally. But I think AI can provide actionable insights instantly. Right. So
Yeah.
how do we use that? How do we? It's a secret weapon, I would say, as long as we use it to create more scale and effectiveness and eliminate any guesswork. So that's my take on AI, and I really hope I don't have to fall with a thud a few years down the road where my organization is using AI avatars. But for now, I think that human touch is needed, and maybe there are organizations that need the scale, and they could possibly test it out. But it'll be, again, marketing is testing, so I think that's where my thought process is. But
Yeah, I think the interestingly, the avatars I don't think are quite there yet. From what I've seen, they're getting better. Even from a year ago, I think they've got a lot better. I think something we're playing around with at the moment, which is very interesting, is the text to speech. So we all know, for example, like a LinkedIn, for example, SDRs and BDRs have such great success. Fairly new tactic, but LinkedIn voice notes. It's only been around for 6 months. Certain industries, certain sectors, certain personas, it's the highest performing channel. It outperforms the phone if done correctly. But actually, where you can add even more value is, me, or not me, but an SDR connecting with a prospect may get a connection acceptance request, may not. A CEO, a head of sales, someone with more domain authority, more credibility in that space, connecting, commenting, gets way more success than an SDR. So what we're starting to see a shift in is SDRs and BDRs can start leveraging their senior execs profiles, still sending out voice notes on behalf of their CEO or whoever, but the connection acceptance rate, the click-through rate, the response rate is huge because you're going to connect with a CEO of a company who wants to chat with you versus a junior BDR or anything else.
yeah,
So
it's an owner to owner kind of a connection, and it's equal status, as they say.
yeah.
Kind of conversations, 100%.
So just let marketers and salespeople like us access those profiles because ultimately a CEO, not all of them, but most senior execs haven't got time to be social selling, multi-threading. It's just they're not going to do it. So we can do it on their behalf, which is great.
And I think it's something so new. And most CEOs, if you've been around working in this professional environment for 30 years, this is like, how there's a little bit of fear as well. I'm definitely going to try the LinkedIn voice notes. I mean, you just dropped that golden nugget here. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, you'll get look, as with anything, give it 6 months and it'll die a death because everyone's doing it. But what definitely has happened a lot at the moment is someone saying, "Hey, I didn't know this was a thing. I've decided to send you my first voice note back," because they're kind of intrigued by the novelty of it. So, and that again, people buy from people. It's about tone of voice. It's you're building that
Humanization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we can be here, talk about this subject forever. And it has been such an insightful session and conversation. Chris, thank you for joining me today.
No problem.
We've covered so much today. I mean, from what sets top performing BDRs to apart from the evolution of outbound, the state of AI, state of outbound, aligning inbound and outbound, different touch points. I think there is definitely lots that you have shared. Your expertise really shines in helping teams navigate this complex challenges while, of course, driving meaningful results. So thank you very much for sharing all the goodness that you guys do at Punch. And for our listeners who want to learn more, I think you can visit Chris's company, punchb2b.com.
Yeah, punchb2b.com. Obviously I just appreciate the kind words, Arti, but I'm always happy to talk to anyone about go-to-markets, outbound, sales, lead gen. And also follow me on LinkedIn if anyone's worth it. Chris Muldoon. I talked about social selling and trying to build your personal brand, but I try to post regularly about anything, these sort of topics, just because it's hopefully useful for someone.
Great resource, absolutely, Chris. Find him at Chris Muldoon, as he said, and trust me, he is someone you really want in your network. So thank you once again, Chris, for joining, and I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Cheers, Arti.
Thank you for listening to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. For more episodes, visit www.fuelyourmarketing.ca.